Happy Sabbath, everyone. So last week, we actually had a request on, what kind of foods we should be eating and what not to be eating for high blood pressure. So that's what we're going to be talking about now. If we can have the slides for the people out in the world to see. So I always start everything with a definition. So what is blood pressure? Well, the blood pressure is the force of the blood that hits the insides of your blood vessels. That's what causes our blood pressure. So the top number, which is a systolic number, is the pressure during the actual ejection of the blood as your heart goes, pumps the blood outward to the rest of your body. And then the bottom number is the diastolic blood pressure. And that's the pressure inside your blood vessels when the heart is at resting. And so what is the high blood pressure is called hypertension. Low blood pressure is called hypotension. So what causes this? Well, a poor diet can cause hypertension. Obesity can cause hypertension. Lack of exercise. Stress can also cause your blood pressure to skyrocket. And other drugs that, that we take. And then last we have genetics as well. So I wanted to let you guys see that genetics is on there. We can't, change our genes, but we have a lot of things that we can do environmentally that can change our blood pressure. So next slide. So what kind of foods, we talked about, our dietary changes. What kind of foods can we avoid to get, to prevent high blood pressure? Well, number one is salt. So wherever salt is, water follows. So this raises the blood volume when we eat a lot of salt because the water follows it inside our blood, and that causes the increase in blood pressure. If the blood pressure is chronically high, then the blood vessels start to harden, and that leads to further blood pressure problems. Not only do you have to worry about the actual salt shaker, but also foods that are high in salt include the processed foods. They have to, in order to package them and process them, they have to add extra salt to make it more flavorful when you actually open it up and start eating it. So those are our deli meats, canned soups, pickles, tomato sauces, frozen pizza, cheesy foods, takeout, on and on and on. Our society is very high in salt, and I have to say I love salt. So this is something I'm speaking to myself as well. And number two, something I also love, but not as much as salt, is sugar. So this not only leads to excess obesity and calories and diabetes, but which both of those actually can lead to high blood pressure, but it can also have a direct relationship to our blood pressure as well. So the increased sugars that are floating around in our blood after a sweet meal will actually change the insides of the blood vessels and make them squeeze more strongly than normal, according to studies published in the British Journal of Pharmacology. This then leads to increased blood pressure, but actually this can eventually lead to things like heart attacks and strokes. However, other studies have shown, though, that sugars that are in fruit and whole grains will actually prevent this from happening. So instead of using sugar to satisfy your sweet tooth, eat a fruit instead. When we are sweetening our foods, foods and drinks, use honey, use fruits instead of the actual sugar. Caffeine. So caffeine actually has been shown to have a real increase in blood pressure, both immediately and chronically for those who drink coffee. But this varies from person to person. So if you have any doubt about your blood pressure and you need to lower it, just stay away from caffeine if you can. That's the safest thing. And then alcohol. So besides causing obesity and increased fatty deposits, alcohol actually changes your body's nervous system in multiple ways. And so these changes actually will cause a release of adrenaline, which is the hormone that causes everything to kind of rise so we can fight and flight, get out of that panic. And this actually messes up the natural way that the blood vessels respond to rising pressure. And that causes the blood vessels then clamp down even further. The alcohol itself damages the inner linings of the blood vessels, which then causes further hypertension. So we focus on the things that we should not do. Let's focus on the positive things, on the things that we should do, what we should eat. Next slide, please. And so my source of where I find, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the different minerals that we should be focusing on, because if I tried to give you a list of, of foods to eat, that would be too long for this presentation. So what I did was I focused on the minerals and the vitamins that we should be eating, and I have a book where it tells me what kind of foods are high in these types of minerals. And so number one, potassium. So potassium actually has an inverse relationship with sodium. The more that potassium you eat, the more that your body gets rid of sodium. So that's why it's very important in people who have high blood pressure. The three top ones that were listed were Swiss chard, crimini mushrooms, and spinach. But others include celery, broccoli, squash, tomatoes, eggplant, cantaloupe, green beans, Brussels sprouts, kale, carrots, beets, papaya, asparagus, basil, cucumbers, turmeric, bell pepper, cauliflower, and apricots. So in my book, it lists out the excellent sources of these minerals, and it also lists the very good and then good. If you notice, we always think bananas are high in potassium, and they are, but there are all these different vegetables and fruits I listed that are even higher in potassium. So the only caveat for potassium is that if you have renal problems, if you have kidney problems, you have to limit your potassium. And so because your kidneys are not able to get rid of it, and that can cause problems if it gets too high. The second thing we should eat more of is flavonoids. So these are the rainbow of our fruits and veggies. If you want to know more about the amazing health benefits of eating your rainbow, I would suggest you search for last week's broadcast when we focused solely on the flavonoids and their health benefits. Third, we should eat more calcium. So don't think that this is just dairy, because my resource that lists nutrients in foods as far as percentage, low-fat milk is number 9. In order of nutrient value, it lists actually number 1, spinach, collard greens, basil, cinnamon, yogurt, Swiss chard, low-fat cheese, kale, and then low-fat milk. Milk actually leaches the calcium from your bones due to its high protein content. So other very good and good sources of plant calcium include romaine lettuce, celery, sesame seeds, broccoli, cabbage, green beans, summer squash, garlic, tofu, mustard seed, Brussels sprouts, oranges, asparagus, and crimini mushrooms. Nitric oxide. So this is a substance in our body that helps us to relax our muscles of the blood vessels so they are not so tight. Garlic and beets are very high in nitric oxide, and arginine is another amino acid that actually will produce nitric oxide inside our body, and foods that are high in arginine include walnuts, seeds, legumes and beans, and whole grains. Watermelon has high citrulline, which is also another amino acid that the body uses to produce nitric oxide. And 'tis a season for sweet watermelon, right? I love watermelon. Oats. So the beta-glucan, which is this part of the oat that makes it sticky, lowers the cholesterol, but in itself can lower blood pressure as well as being a good source of high fiber. So how to eat more oatmeal or oats? You eat more oatmeal, granola. If during this time, if you're not so much a person for oatmeal, then you can actually grind the oats and use it as fillers in your burgers and other sauces and stuff. Excuse me. Omega-3 fatty acids. So these reduce inflammation, they regulate blood clotting, and it maintains a fluid structure of our cell membrane. So it's very important for our blood pressure as well. Again, omega-3s are not just found in your fish oils. In fact, the flaxseed is 5 times better as far as nutritional value of omega-3 fatty acids than salmon is. And walnuts are twice the nutrient density. Cauliflower has the same nutrient value as salmon in omega-3 fatty acids. So other than seafood, the only other sources are from plants and are listed as cabbage, romaine lettuce, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, squash, tofu, collard greens, spinach, kale, soybeans, strawberries, and green beans. And lastly, I put dark chocolate in there. And I list this for a few reasons. Number one is because I love chocolate. And there are studies that show that dark chocolate can lower blood pressure. But I also listed on there as well as a warning for those of us who search the internet for health information. While it is true that chocolate can lower your blood pressure, these studies are funded mostly by the chocolate companies. And what they left out are the details that those benefits are only very short-lived, and the problems of all the extra sugar and all the other stuff that they put in the chocolate far outweigh the health benefits. So I put that in there to help us remind us that when we look at stuff, we have to also look with a discerning eye what kind of studies out there. You might also find other studies that say wine, coffee, chocolate are also beneficial to our health, but they're not really so much. So brothers and sisters in Christ, I am so thankful that our Creator God has already given us the prevention and the cure to our diseases that afflict our world today. In Revelation 22, verse 2, it does talk about heaven and the tree of life. On either side of the river there was a tree of life which bare 12 manner of fruits and yielded her fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. The tree of life, which gives life eternal, is already here with us on earth. Let us, brothers and sisters, familiarize ourselves with the healing power of plants for our physical, emotional, and spiritual health. You guys have a happy Sabbath.